The city of Eloria shined under the glass dome that covered it like a jewel. Silver towers rose all around, and the air was always filled with soft light from the giant crystals that floated above the streets. In the middle of this bright and perfect world lived Princess Alara, daughter of Queen Helena of the Solaran Kingdom. She had been born into comfort, used to gold halls, perfect manners, and the constant sound of music. People bowed when she walked by, servants hurried to open doors, and every day felt the same. Alara was kind, and that kindness made her restless. She looked around her and saw beauty, but no heart. She often walked through the gardens at night, when no one else was awake, to sit by the fountain and look at the stars that shone through the dome. She would think about what lay outside. The galaxy was wide, full of worlds and stories, but none of them ever touched her life. One evening, while she sat near the garden fountain, she noticed someone new. A man in plain gray work clothes was kneeling beside a broken power conduit. Sparks danced from his tool as he worked quietly in the soft blue light. His hair was short and dark, his hands rough, his movements careful and skilled. He did not notice her at first. That alone surprised her. Everyone always noticed the princess. She spoke gently, curious. "You're working late." The man looked up, startled, then quickly stood. "Your Highness?" He bowed awkwardly, clearly not used to royal manners. The fans in the East Court kept failing. "I wanted to finish before tomorrow." "What is your name?" she asked. "Nathan," he said simply. "Nathan Hale. I'm part of the lower maintenance crew." Alara smiled faintly. "Then you fix what others break." He looked at her, puzzled for a moment, then smiled back. "You could say that." Something about his answer stayed with her. There was no flattery, no smooth talk as she usually heard from noblemen. He spoke to her as if she were only another person standing nearby. After that evening, Alara found reasons to pass through the gardens more often. Somehow, Nathan was always there, working on a system, repairing a light, testing energy valves. They spoke a little each time. He had traveled far between the colonies before coming here. He never spoke much about his past. Only small bits, how he had learned to weld in the shipyards, how he liked to see the stars without barriers of glass. Slowly, the princess and the worker found comfort in each other's company. They began to meet not only in the gardens, but also near the city's lower terraces, where common people laughed more freely than in the marble halls of the palace. Alara saw a world she had never known, crowded streets, markets full of color and noise, children playing with broken drones, people who worked until dawn yet smiled as if they owned the suns themselves. Nathan guided her gently, never proud, never afraid. He treated her not as a royal figure but as a friend. When she asked about his scars, he only said old mistakes. When she offered him precious gifts, he refused them with quiet respect. It made her admire him even more. Rumors began to spread in the palace. Servants whispered that the princess had fallen for a worker. The queen was not pleased. She told Alara that royalty must choose partners for the future of the kingdom, not for love. But Alara only said one thing: "How can I rule people I do not know?" She had seen the workers' hands, their tired eyes, their honest smiles, and she no longer wanted a life of perfect halls and empty words. Months passed. The palace tried to separate them, but something stronger kept drawing her back. Nathan became her secret hope. When she spoke to him, she forgot the rules of crowns and courts. One evening, as the dome lights turned purple for dusk, Nathan stood waiting by the fountain where they had first met. "Your mother will never allow this," he said quietly. "I know," Alara replied, "but I am not a person who lets fear decide everything." Nathan looked at her for a long time. "If you choose this path, it will not be easy. The world will not understand why a princess marries a worker." "Then," she said softly, "let them try to understand." Soon after, the palace square shined brighter than ever before, against the customs of the kingdom. Alara stood before her people and declared her wish to marry Nathan Hale. Gasps filled the air. Some nobles turned away in disgust. Some shouted in anger. But the common people cheered until the air trembled. As her mother watched in silent shock, Alara took Nathan's hand. There were no gold rings, no long speeches. Just a promise spoken in plain words beneath the glowing dome. In that moment, the kingdom changed. No one yet knew who Nathan Hale really was. No one guessed what power and mystery waited beneath his quiet smile. But for Alara, the truth did not matter that day. She had chosen love over pride, and beside her stood the man who would soon show the world that he was anything but common. The first weeks after the wedding were peaceful. The city of Eloria glittered as always, but for Princess Alara, it now felt different. The tall glass towers and floating lights no longer seemed cold. She had Nathan beside her, and that made everything shine with new meaning. People in the streets still talked about their marriage. Some said it was a beautiful story of love. Others whispered that it was foolish, that a common worker could never belong among nobles. But Alara did not care, and Nathan did not complain. Every morning he woke up before her to begin his work. He still wore his plain gray clothes, still carried his tools, still fixed the same power lines and water systems he always had. When people asked him why he did not take advantage of his new position, he only said, "Work keeps my hands honest." That answer spread through the palace, and some began to respect him for it, even if they did not understand him. Alara tried to fit Nathan into court life, but he never looked comfortable. The royal dinners made him restless. The talks among nobles about trade and wealth bored him completely. Sometimes when the speeches grew too long, he would quietly excuse himself and disappear to the palace workshops, saying that he wanted to check the backup systems. Alara would follow him later and find him there, sitting among tools and wires, completely at ease. She laughed once and said, "You must love machines more than crowns." He had smiled and replied, "Machines are simple, people are not." Still, Alara was happy. She saw more sides of her husband each day. He was gentle with the workers, firm with the lazy guards, and quick to laugh with the cooks in the palace kitchen. But there were things about him that puzzled her. Every night before sleeping, he would check a small metal device on his wrist, one that did not match any of the kingdom's designs. When she asked what it was, he would say, "Just an old piece of memory." She noticed that sometimes he stayed awake long after she fell asleep, staring out the window at the distant horizon beyond the dome. Once, in the middle of the night, she woke to see him standing there, whispering a word she did not understand. It sounded like Aegis. When she asked the next morning, he said it was only the name of a story he used to know. His eyes gave a flicker of sadness, but closed quickly behind a smile. The queen visited less often now, letting Alara learn on her own, but the palace was still full of eyes and ears. Nobles waited for Nathan to fail. Some wanted him to make a mistake they could use to shame Alara and prove that love could not mix with duty. They watched him everywhere, but he gave them no reason to speak. He did his work quietly, treated everyone with respect, and never raised his voice. This calmness confused them more than any show of power. Time moved on, and life seemed steady, until one morning, the city alarms began to scream. Bright red light filled the palace walls. The sound echoing through the air was sharp and endless. Alara jumped from her chair in the royal meeting chamber as soldiers burst through the doors. "Attack incoming," the captain shouted. "The outer defense grid has been breached." The queen's advisors rushed to the screens. The images showed dark ships cutting through the sky beyond the dome. Fire streaked behind them as they moved closer. People in the streets looked up in terror. For 100 years, no enemy had dared to strike the Solaron capital. Alara turned to Nathan. "What should we do?" she whispered. He hesitated only for a breath. His calm eyes turned toward the flashing lights and sirens. "Go with your mother to the lower chambers," he said. "I'll handle the systems." "The systems?" she asked, but before she could press him further, he ran from the hall. Guards tried to follow, but he moved faster, weaving through corridors with a sure sense of direction. Outside explosions shook the dome. Parts of the outer glass cracked, raining pieces of light down on the city. Soldiers scrambled, shouting commands, but confusion spread quickly. The queen ordered her fleet to gather, yet the communication lines broke. Alara refused to hide underground. She left the safety chamber and climbed up through the smoke-filled corridors, searching for Nathan. The smell of burning wires mixed with dust made it hard to breathe. She finally found him in a chamber filled with old weapons from the reunification war. He was standing before a sealed case, his palms pressed against a panel that glowed under his touch. The sound of battle outside faded for a moment. The entire chamber seemed to hum around her. Lara took a step closer and saw the reflection of something long and silver inside the glass case. "Nathan," she called quietly. He turned to her. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharper than she had ever seen them. "Alara, stay behind me," he said. "Why? What is this?" She pointed to the case. He looked at it, then back at her. "It's something I hoped never to use again." At that moment, the floor shook violently, sending dust and sparks into the air. The dome above cracked again, and sirens filled the air with a low scream. Ilara's heart pounded as the doors behind her burst open. The guards shouted that invaders had entered the palace grounds. Nathan moved to the case. With a deep sound, the seals unlocked. He wrapped his hand around something bright, and a line of light flashed through the room. The once quiet worker now looked completely different. The glow from the blade touched his face, as if lighting a side of him that had been sleeping too long. Alara realized that the man she had married was not at all what he seemed to be. The truth, waiting like a buried flame, had just begun to rise. The whole palace shook, as if the sky itself had fallen. Windows shattered, guards shouted, and thick smoke climbed up the walls. Alara could hardly see through the dust, but the bright light in front of her made her stop. Nathan stood there, holding a glowing sword that looked alive. It gave off a deep sound like a heart beating inside metal. Alara had never seen anything like it. The blade hummed with power. Thin blue line ran down its center, moving like fire trapped in glass. The air around it shimmered faintly. Nathan's posture had changed too. He no longer looked like a shy worker. Shoulders were straight, his eyes cold and focused. Before she could speak, the heavy doors burst open and armed men rushed in. Their armor was dark, their faces covered. They pointed energy weapons in every direction. One shouted, "Surrender," but Nathan was already moving. The first man fired. The beam shot across the air, but Nathan swung the sword and cut the beam itself in half. It vanished before reaching him. A hum filled the chamber, and then he moved faster than her eyes could follow. In seconds, the attackers lay on the ground, stunned or motionless. The blade dimmed as he took a slow breath. Alara stared in disbelief. "Who are you?" she whispered. Nathan looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, one who once promised to never draw this sword again. He turned toward the window, where red fire painted the horizon. Ships filled the sky. The city's defense towers spat light upward, trying to stop the attackers, but more ships kept breaking through. The Queen's guards shouted orders, but their voices were drowned out by the roar of battle. Alara grabbed Nathan's arm. "You can help them, can't you?" He looked at her again, his eyes sad. "I can try, but if I do, there's no going back." "Then do it," she said. "Save them." For a moment he hesitated, and then he nodded. He touched his wrist device, and a signal flashed across its surface. Somewhere deep in the palace, old systems came alive. Doors opened, hidden panels slid apart, and lights began to glow in forgotten chambers. The old network, the one built during the war, was coming back online. Soldiers outside heard the sound of new engines starting. Large machines buried under the palace grounds rose from their platforms. Tall and smooth with bright panels along their sides, these were the Aegis Defenders, machines of the old world that no one had used in decades. Nathan's hand moved swiftly over the controls on his device, sending commands. Lara followed him through the smoke. They reached the outer balcony just as a mighty blast hit the shield dome. The transparent wall cracked, and a loud sound echoed through the city. Nathan raised his arm, and the old defense towers linked with the power core beneath them. A net of energy spread across the sky, blocking the next wave of fire. "You knew this place had old weapons," Alara said in amazement. "I built them," Nathan replied quietly. "A long time ago." Shadows of ships streaked close, shaking the balcony as they fired again. Nathan lifted the sword, pressed a small key on his wrist, and pointed it upward. A tower beside the palace turned and fired a burst of blue light that tore through one of the invader ships. It exploded in silence before anyone could even breathe. Alara watched the scene unfold like a dream. Nathan moved from one control panel to another, his face calm while chaos surrounded them. He spoke into a small microphone clipped to his collar. His voice was firm. Soldiers across the city heard him, and his commands brought order to the chaos. "Pull back to the inner ring," he said. "Hold your fire until signal Delta 7. No one questioned how he knew the codes, or why every security system in the capital answered to his command. They simply obeyed. As the fighting continued, Nathan's body began to tremble from exhaustion, but he did not stop. The light from his sword glowed brighter each time he deflected another blast. Lara wanted to help him, but she knew she could not. She could only stay near, hoping he would not fall. Finally, as the horizon turned pale with dawn, the last of the enemy ships began to retreat. The people who had invaded Eloria were quick to flee once they saw their fleet destroyed. The city lights shimmered weakly and the sounds of battle slowly faded. Nathan stood on the balcony, breathing heavily, his sword still shining faintly. The once neat uniform of a worker was now torn and burned. The ground was covered in smoke and broken glass. Ilara stepped forward. "You saved us," she said softly. "You saved everyone." Nathan lowered his head. "Not everyone," he answered. "Many still fell." She wanted to ask again who he was, what he had done before he came into her life, but she sensed that the answer was heavy. He turned to her, eyes tired but steady. "Now you know the truth," he said. "I'm not just a man who fixes broken wires. I am someone who used to fight wars and hoped never to fight again." Ilara did not look away. "Then you are still the man I chose," she said. "Even if you fight, you still stand for something good." Nathan looked out over the silent city, then back at her. The sword's light dimmed at last, leaving only the sunrise to touch his face. For a moment, he looked at peace again. But far beyond the horizon, he could already see new shadows moving among the stars, and he knew this peace would not last. The smoke from the battle still hung in the air the next morning. The city was quiet, almost too quiet. Streets that had been full of fear and fire now lay covered in dust and pieces of broken glass. People walked slowly, looking around as if they were afraid the peace would suddenly end. In the center of the city, the tall palace stood with its dome cracked, but still shining under the light of dawn. Inside the palace, Princess Ilara sat beside Nathan in the great hall. The fire from the night before had left black marks on the high walls. The smell of smoke mixed with the scent of metal and oil. Nathan's hands were wrapped in white cloth, his face pale. He had fought all night, giving every bit of strength he had to save the city. Ilara looked at him with worry. "You need to rest," she said softly. Nathan shook his head. "Not yet. There is still danger. The attack was not random. They were testing our defenses. They will come again." "How do you know that?" she asked, watching the tired lines around his eyes. He hesitated, as if thinking about what he could tell her. Then he said, "Because I once fought the same kind of war. I know how they plan, and when they strike. I know because I used to be part of it." Ilara frowned. "Part of it? You mean you fought in the old wars? The reunification war?" "Yes," he replied quietly. "I was not just a soldier. I led a unit called the Aegis Protocol. We were trained to control the ancient defense networks, the same ones I used last night. Most people believe we all died when the last battle ended, but I lived, and I ran. I wanted to forget everything." For a long moment, silence filled the hall. Ilara could hear only the faint crackle of the fires outside. She reached out and touched his hand. "You tried to live a simple life," she said gently, "and you found me. The past does not own you anymore." He gave a small smile, though sadness stayed in his eyes. "The past never truly goes away. It waits until we face it again." The queen entered the hall just then, followed by her guards. Her royal robe was still torn, but her eyes were sharp and clear. She looked from Ilara to Nathan. "She saved this city," she said, her voice firm, "and for that, I thank you. But I must also know the truth. Who are you really?" Nathan stood carefully. Even tired, his voice was strong. "I was Captain Nathaniel Hale of the Aegis Protocol. We were created to end wars before they began. Our bodies were changed to survive when others could not. We gave up our names, our homes, everything. When the war ended, I chose to stay hidden. I only wanted peace." The queen listened quietly. She turned to her daughter. "You have chosen a husband of great strength, perhaps greater than any man of this court. But strength invites danger. The public will want answers. I will give them the truth," Ilara said. "They will know that he fought for them once, and fought for them again now. Be careful, child," the queen warned. "People fear what they do not understand." Nathan bowed. Then let them see my actions, not my past, he said. Over the next few days, Nathan helped the engineers rebuild the city's energy systems. He repaired towers, checked weapons, and worked with soldiers who once doubted him. Many began to respect him. Some even called him the living shield of Eloria. But Nathan felt uneasy inside. Each night, he stood by the balcony, watching the sky, knowing that the war was not over. One night, Elara joined him. The stars above were bright and calm. She touched his arm. "The people are safe now," she said. "You should be proud." He nodded, but his voice was low. "I am proud, but peace built on fear cannot last. Someone will come looking for the sword. There are those who want the old power back." Elara looked at the glowing weapon resting in a case beside the balcony. "Then we will protect it," she said, "together." He smiled faintly. "If anything happens, promise me you will keep hope, no matter what." "I will," she promised. The next morning, ministers from the Federation and nearby colonies arrived at the palace. They wanted to meet the man who had saved Solara. Some looked impressed, some suspicious. They spoke in long meetings, asking him questions about his methods, his weapon, and his training. Nathan answered simply, but gave away little. He could see their hidden greed. They wanted to know the secret behind the sword. After the meetings, he returned to Alara's side. "They do not want peace," he said quietly. "They want power. Then we will show them that true power is mercy and wisdom," Elara replied. Her words gave him calm for a moment, but deep down, he felt a shadow moving closer. The stories of the Aegis weapon were spreading fast. Armies, officials, and distant leaders would all come searching for the man who once commanded the ancient machines. That night, as clouds covered the sky, Nathan placed his hand against the glass of the dome. He could feel the heartbeat of the city below him, steady and alive. He closed his eyes and whispered words only the stars could hear. "Let this peace hold a little longer." Beside him, Elara stood silent, her hands sliding into his. Together, they faced the rising future, knowing that the calm could break again at any moment. And far off in the dark beyond the lights, new ships began to stir. Ready to test once more the man who wished only for peace but carried the sword of legend. The days passed and the city started to heal. Broken towers were repaired and the people began to smile again. Markets reopened, children played in the gardens, and lights filled the streets every night, as if to remind everyone that life could still be bright after darkness. Princess Elara walked among her people often, helping where she could. She no longer dressed in gold robes but in simple white. They called her the People's Queen because she worked beside them instead of giving orders from behind the palace walls. Nathan stayed at her side but remained quiet most of the time. He still fixed machines and helped rebuild the damaged defense towers, yet his heart was restless. He knew something was stirring far beyond the city's protective dome. New messages were being hidden in the Federation's old channels. Strange signals echoing across space grew stronger each night. He recognized the pattern. It was a call to arms, but not from their own forces. One evening, Nathan stood on the high balcony with his wrist device glowing softly. He read the signal again. His face turned pale. He now knew that another army was coming, stronger and smarter than before. They would not stop at one city. They wanted the sword, the old technology, and every secret it guarded. Elara joined him and looked at the sky. "You've seen it too," she said quietly. "Yes," he answered. "You're sending a full force this time. I cannot let this world face that alone." Her voice trembled. "You've given enough, Nathan. Isn't there any way to stop fighting?" He looked at her gently. "If I walk away, others will suffer. The sword chose its bearer a long time ago, and now that bearer is me again. But this time, I am not fighting for orders. I am fighting for you, for this city, for peace." Tears formed in her eyes. "And promise you will come back." "I promise," he said. That night, Nathan went to the old chamber beneath the palace, where the sword rested. The lights on the walls began to glow as he walked closer. The sword responded to him, humming softly, as if recognizing its master. He reached out and held it again. The same blue light ran through the blade, bright and warm. For a moment, he closed his eyes and remembered the quiet days fixing wires and walking in gardens with Elara. He hoped that peace would last forever. But part of him always knew it would be short. When the next attack came, It was swift and fierce. The sky turned red with burning lines. People ran toward the underground shelters while soldiers hurried to their positions. But this time, the defense systems worked perfectly. The walls of light around the city held strong. Nathan moved across the command bridge, giving orders and guiding the defense units. Alara refused to hide. She stayed near him, helping send messages to different sectors. "The east gates are holding," she said as a new report came in. "The people are safe for now." Nathan nodded. "Good. Keep the northern line steady. We need to concentrate power there." Outside, the battle raged for hours. Nathan's sword flashed across the air again and again, cutting through explosion after explosion. He fought beside the guards, not above them. His presence gave everyone courage. The people shouted his name, and the soldiers fought harder as if the whole world was standing on his shoulders. At last, the attackers were pushed back. Their ships turned and fled beyond the horizon, leaving nothing behind but smoke and silence. The city was safe once more. Nathan stood on the balcony, the sword dimming as the first light of morning spread across the sky. Alara walked up beside him, lifting her hand to rest on his shoulder. "It's over," she said softly. He looked tired, but smiled. "For now, you kept your promise," she said. "You came back." "I always will," he told her. "As long as this city stands, I will be here to protect it." In the weeks that followed, the Queen announced her decision to make Alara and Nathan the joint rulers of the Solaron Kingdom. The people cheered as the couple stood together before them. Nathan wore no shining armor, only a plain tunic with the symbol of the phoenix stitched across the chest. He refused grand titles or medals, saying, "I need no crown. The only honor I want is to serve." That night, after the crowds had gone, Nathan and Alara walked through the city streets hand in hand. Workers waved to them, children followed them, and the sound of music floated through the air. Life had returned stronger than before. It was built not on fear, but on faith. As they reached the garden where they had first met, Alara stopped and looked at him. "Do you ever wish you could be that simple worker again? The one who fixed broken lights?" He smiled faintly. "Sometimes.
Oh.
But maybe that man never left." He only learned that even simple hands can hold great power. She touched his arm and leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then promise me one thing," she said. "No matter how many battles come, always remember who you are." He nodded slowly. "I will remember." The faint glow of his sword, now hidden within the palace, flickered once in its case, as if agreeing with his words. The city's dome shimmered back to full power, and for the first time in many years, every light across Aloria burned bright with hope. High above them, the stars stretched wide and endless, and in that silence, the city stood as a symbol of peace, born from courage and love. Nathan Hale, once thought to be an ordinary man, had become more than a legend. He had become the heart of a world that refused to surrender. And beside him, Alara shone with quiet strength. Proof that even in a broken world, love could rebuild what war tried to destroy.